Not yet. Push the button when he comes.
Testing.
And you get a special permit. And then you can't buy the house.
Okay.
When somebody
Testing,
in the public is
testing,
speaking,
testing.
can you pick it up, or should I?
Use these mics. Sometimes one of the design flaws. This room's pretty good design-wise, but the only one is that this mic is right underneath that speaker,
Mm-hmm.
and people will often turn it up, which creates a feedback loop. So I'm going to point it down like that, which helps a little bit. So if you see somebody turning it up, you might want to say, "Hey,
All right.
Because if I go, that'll didn't do it. But that if somebody's loud, gets heated or whatever, that does happen sometimes. I can turn it down from.
Well, the reports we get, I might ask them to sit and move, versus stand, just because they used to sitting there and reporting to us from the audience.
Yeah, I mean sometimes I can hear the audience without going to the mic. It kind of just depends on how much the person projects.
Does that one get feedback also?
Same situation. Speaker's right there. So.
Maybe if you put it right next to that end seat and angle it down, then the person can sit in that end seat.
Sure. I mean that's
sit right here.
The front end. Yeah.
Put it right over here next to this gentleman, because he speaks a lot.
He's very talkative. We don't get a word in edgewise.
For real?
No.
Thanks.
You could probably reach.
He's borderline mute.
Okay. Thank you.
Catching anything, Kona? Yeah. No summer activities? Yeah. You don't fish for anything in the summer?
Customers.
You leave your boat in all summer, or do you have it out? It's out. Yeah. No point in waiting any longer. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board, June 19th, 5 p.m. Is there an approval for the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
The minutes
That's
not prepared yet?
We'll have it for the July meeting.
Okay. Just mark your calendars. It's tentative that there will be a pond management forum on July 23rd. Not sure of the time and place yet. And also advertised is the Nantucket Shellfish Association's annual meeting. It's on June 25th at 5 o'clock, held at the Admiralty Club, and Roberto Santamaria will be the speaker.
What's that date again?
June 25th,
Okay.
5 p.m. Open to the public. Summer meeting schedule. When I was just looking at this, July 3rd being a Monday, the 4th being Tuesday, I'm wondering if it's just inappropriate to have a meeting at that time, if we should move forward to the 18th for our next meeting.
Sure. I'll just need to call Marita to see if this room is available. Okay.
Thoughts from the
Seems
board?
like a good idea. I mean,
I
the
got a
middle of
feeling
4th
on-
of July weekend is not.
Can't imagine even Kona would want to attend. So, I talked with Sheila Lucy, telling her we'd be discussing some things about the town pier, where she had the meeting before our last meeting with Charlie Gibson. And I was hearing some comments with some unhappy people who use the town pier, and having some comments about its condition. And I thought it would be good if all of us went down there and took a look and made a little, personal assessment and see what you think. Certainly it gets its share of damage every year, but we'll talk about that more under new business, I guess. But Sheila is swamped with work. She cannot make it tonight. I did not hear back from Jeff. So, but Sheila said she would love to speak more about the town pier and its condition at our next meeting. Not seeing her. Moving on from Marine Department report, Natural Resources, not seeing representation there. Public comment on either of those, not being anything to comment on. We'll move forward to old business. We had the lengthy presentation by Rob McNeil at our last meeting, and I was wondering if anybody had anything they wanted to discuss, since we didn't take a whole lot of time discussing anything. If there were any thoughts or ideas that we may be able to help along with or talk about more, and what more can be done. I know just today I was at the dump and noticed somebody throwing cans of latex paint in the metal dumpster, and they were reprimanded, and they had to hook the cans out. There was still paint in the cans. And latex paint's not considered a hazardous waste, but there are ways you're supposed to dispose of it. So I'm just hoping they come up with a program that covers all bases. And if we have any thoughts that could add to it before they finalize signage and things like that, I think we ought to speak up. I noticed they've changed the signs at the materials recovery facility, and so that they're both in English and Spanish, but they've eliminated some things. There's no more magazines, books, or mixed paper. It's all cardboard. But anyhow, so board members, any thoughts? Ken?
Well, as you said that they redid the dump there with the signs, and as you also said that they don't have the paper, they just have any kind of plastic goes into a number of bins, and cardboard goes into a number of bins, and then the tin and aluminum. But in the same respect, they could have signs about hazardous waste right there in Spanish, to right side on, that if you have something that you're not sure if it's toxic or not, that you could ask someone. And as you were saying, they did catch those people with the latex paint, but that was probably a random catch with things, because there's not enough people there really to monitor the people that are dumping things off. I think they try to do a good job, but there's not enough people there. They need more manpower to screen what comes in.
And proper places for it, so they don't get turned away and end up ditching it where it doesn't belong, which I think is a negative effect of having random and seldom times for collection.
Well, I'm very sorry that I missed that report, but I was unavoidably having to be elsewhere. Is it no longer true that in the metal dumpster you can put the cans in which latex paint originally came if you absorb the end, the last little bit with kitty litter? That was used to be the instruction, was to dry up the paint with kitty litter, and then put the can with the dry paint, kitty litter mix, whatever was in it, into the metal dumpster. Is that not the case anymore?
I wish I knew that 100%. We probably shouldn't get too carried away on how they're separating things there, but I was under the impression you were supposed to, only empty cans go in the metal, and the latex paint in the kitty litter or whatever absorbent is supposed to go into bulky. But not 100% on that.
Well, kind of my point is that the rules seem to change, and it can be different depending on who's working what day and who you ask.
Mhm.
So it's, some clarity there would probably help.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, correct me, Peter, if I'm allowing our discussion to go out of our purview. I don't know.
Well, before Rob left, I asked him about what you had heard, that he might be setting up something where there would be collection bins for all the hazardous waste at the materials recovery facility that would be there all the time. And he said that, I remember he said he was working on that, but that to me seems like the solution, because then the scofflaws won't be scofflaws, because just like putting our cans and plastic and paper in one place, there'll be a place for all that stuff. It would seem to me that would be the highest priority, is to get that going on.
Mm-hmm.
Have places where people learn that that's where you put those things, and you dump your oil here and you put your turpentine there or whatever, and then here's a bin to collect your aerosols and all your stuff. I mean, it seems like that's and I don't know how much more manpower that requires them, but in terms of keeping that out of our water systems, out of our ponds, our harbors, our groundwater, it would seem like.
Then we're not stepping out of bounds with this
Because
discussion.
how many people have been at the dump knowing that they had something that they didn't want the dump ladies to see, and put it down a chute because you didn't separate it? I mean, I think we've all maybe have done that once or twice. So us being responsible people may have done that a few times, but then the people who just aren't even thinking about it, and those people are out there, and they got caught putting their cans in paint. How many other people are doing that that don't get caught? And more metal gets thrown on there, and down in the bottom of that thing, maybe there's 30 cans that are half full of paint. So how do you know?
Right.
So if there was an actual place where you put them, where you knew, where it said it in English and Spanish, I would think that would be better than. And I know the ladies at the dump do a great job, but it gets busy there, so you can't catch everybody.
Right. But it seemed as though having a collection site that was available during all dump hours, he didn't seem all that in favor of it to me. But maybe I'm wrong. Did you gather otherwise?
It seems like he hasn't given it as much
Yeah.
thought that he wanted to.
Yeah.
Maybe if he was still here, I would say, maybe once a week is the day that it's done. At least it was done once a week. But 7 times a year is.
No, we're a transient island. I mean, people have deadlines. People have, renters coming. They're in a hurry. Do a fix-up job, and what do you do with the leftovers? And so, would it be warranted that we advise that a system be looked into that accepts these products on a more regular basis?
I would just. This is one of those things where keeping Rob in the loop. This would be something I would feel we maybe want to recommend to the Board of Selectmen. We wouldn't want to blindside Rob with a recommendation. We want to say we think this should happen. We know that this has been thought about. Is this something that can be done? Maybe, I don't know. Because, and in light of the dumping of paint into the drain in Sconset, you can preface it with that, I guess. But
Are there state regulations that have to be observed with when, where things can be handled and by whom?
I would imagine so, and a proper
that may be the
facility
holdup.
that has, spillways, or, I'm sure it has to be someplace with a concrete floor and a certain height of a foundation all the way around it in case there were spills. It couldn't just be a,
Well, it sounds expensive, is
Yeah,
what it.
yeah.
So it's I think it would be, maybe if we met with Rob again, I'm sorry again that I missed it, but maybe if we could, that if he could come up with a couple of designs and that we could, talk to the selectmen about it, maybe present it at a town meeting as something that, would be not quite as expensive as sewering the whole island, but something that is a real need.
I agree. I wish I had like some photos of what other towns have. I keep visualizing the little town of 1400 where I lived in New Hampshire, having a shed about 6 foot by 6 foot, and it handled every bit of what people took in, and the door was open.
Maybe you could start there, and you could actually call the town and find out what it cost them to do that, and how they went about it. Then you'd have some sort of basis.
So New Hampshire having some different rules. They allow these mechanics come and take all the oil and they burn it in waste oil heaters, and those are highly regulated here.
But it's not what's done with the materials. It's find out from the town how much it costs them to collect it. What happens afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that'd be a place to start, because you might have some figures to throw at the town and say, oh, well, at least this is what I know, and then maybe we could find out where else they do it in the state.
Sure,
if they do it.
and you could multiply it there from population, and
but it would be, if it's at the MRF, then it would be Waste Options ultimately that would be doing it. So then it would be the town paying for it, paying Waste Options. So
Waste Options does not handle the take it or leave it.
Right, but
so it could be done by others also, I would imagine, because take it or leave it is. And if the DPW hired one guy to man this station, it could be worth it versus what people are ending up being encouraged to do. I mean, they really, not to get off subject, but if you have more than a barrel of construction debris from a home project, they're making you go over the scale now. And if you go in with more than a pickup truck full of brush in one day, they're thinking you're clearing a building lot, and they're asking you to pay for that also, for the processing. And a lot of things that used to be easier for the homeowner to discard are now becoming items that are charged for, and that's what ends up encouraging people to turn around and go and dump it in the moors. Meantime, excavation waste, i.e. bricks, concrete mixed with dirt, maybe some metal pipes, is brought in by 10-wheel dump trucks of legitimate construction outfits, and they're subsidized so that material doesn't end up somewhere out in the moors. But I've never seen a Miles Reese truck or a Toscana truck dumping their load out in the bushes somewhere. So it doesn't make sense to me why that type of material is subsidized, and the homeowner seems to be taking it on the chin again. But I'd love to come up with a solid plan that we could present that may be considered, or parts of it used or something, but certainly a facility that can take these products on a more regular basis would be advantageous to our environment. Anybody else? Fritz?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. One thing that Rob talked about was the construction hazardous waste, and what goes down storm drains and into the ground and into the dumpsters. And I think his comment was there doesn't seem to be any one town department or agency that's solely responsible for that. It's sort of like the Department of Health, the DPW, planning department or building inspector, and that. So I had mentioned that one thing I might try to do is to get some representatives or a representative of all three of those agencies together just to talk about what might be done. But clearly, if there was a regular place you could dump paint thinner, those types of construction debris or waste at the dump, it's probably would be more successful because those people are going to the dump. I mean, if you got to go to the dump to get rid of the excess wood and everything else, why would it be more difficult for them to drop off if they know they could do it? If they knew they could drop off a can of paint thinner, used paint thinner, presumably they're willing to put it back in a can someplace so they, can be reprocessed or disposed of. I think that would help. So it's a question of, is that a DPW issue or is that a town issue with the management of the dump? I don't know the answer to that.
It could be even three-faceted. Personally, I feel each job site should have a container that things are kept in, that type of waste. Otherwise, the dumpster is the go-to place. And everything's going in these dumpsters. It makes it so convenient. But it's really just an ugly mixed bag once it's all in there together. And so to me, it would start with the building department and then having the accessibility for disposing of it with more convenient times.
Most of those construction debris go off island anyway, don't they?
All the construction debris is shipped off island, C&D.
Not that they couldn't leak out before they get off island.
Right. It's leaking at job sites out of the dump. All dumpsters are set down in pitch so the rainwater runs out of the back of them. So, you get 30 tubes of PL 400 in there still oozing a little bit out, and, it takes weeks for the dumpster to be filled. So there's a lot of cycles of rainstorms running through the dumpster, and whatever's in there is being rinsed out and washed out the back is kind of the way I see it. I think the dumpster is the biggest culprit that came to this island, but one of them anyway. Back in the 90s, nobody was using dumpsters. They didn't exist. Barely. But any other thoughts?
One thought is that, if we didn't want to go the route of actually formally making a recommendation, that after we'd spoken to Rob again and told him what we were interested in, then we might, come to a Board of Selectmen meeting, and during public comment, you or me or whoever else would get up and say, this is what we're working on. What do you guys think? Is this worth us pursuing? So it doesn't make it a formal sit down. It's just an idea that we're throwing out. Or you could meet with various selectmen. You could meet with Jason Bridges or Rita and propose your idea and say you've got, whatever support you have from Rob, and ask them what they thought of adding that as an expense. Something like that. So we're not, I guess you're going to go the route where you're going to, you want a public hearing with the selectmen for your recommendation. It's an advertising thing that they have to do, and so we better have our ducks in a row before we go. We better have Rob's support, and hey, we want to do this, and Rob saying, hey, we can't do this, and so. Well, I'm just saying that there's stepping down stages before we come to the final thing where, and of course, the selectmen, the chairman and the vice chairman and Libby get together and look at what the agenda is going to be each week and decide if this is worthy of being on there. So,
10 days in advance now.
right. So we should be on our game if this is something we want to do.
Certainly, no. I think it's been a busy spring, but our next meeting isn't for a month, so maybe I haven't put pencil to paper in quite some time. Maybe I can just jot down the idea, and like you say, I like the approach of talking to some of the selectmen, run it by Rob, and see what they're working on.
Sorry, you wouldn't necessarily have to have him back here. You could
Right.
give an ask
Yeah.
and say, "Are we wasting our time trying to push this?" And
Well, we know he's doing something.
yeah,
And so now's the time, if there's any ideas and suggestions he hasn't thought of, now's the time to maybe jot something down and put it in front of him and see what he thinks. So, all right.
I did have one other thought as you were talking. I think you have a good point about the dumpsters and the runoff, and as with the fertilizer work group, maybe talk to some of the builders, and people don't want to add too much time to what because they're struggling already with their margins, but see if we could work with them too in terms of what they would like to make it easy for them to do their work and not pollute. Because they're ultimately going to be the ones who have to comply.
Yeah.
Whatever we do.
Association have a regular meeting?
I believe so. I think they meet monthly.
Eventually try and get on their agenda.
Yeah.
And another thing you could do is you could just write a letter of information, or I don't know if that's what it's called, but you just write a letter to the select board saying, we're working on this. What do you guys think? And say, these are our concerns. We realize that we're not a regulatory board, and we realize we're not the select board, but we are concerned about how the quality of our water flowing into our harbors and ponds affects shellfish and fishing, and so we're working on this, and just to see what sort of response we might get. And you could address all of the members of the select board and the town manager, and that would get spread around, and hopefully we would get a response. No, you guys are crazy, or we've got that covered, or keep going, and we look forward to your recommendations, whatever they would say.
All right. I'm making a note to myself to work on a draft proposal for enhanced hazardous waste collection and job site separation.
Can we combine the letter with the issue that we would like to see more hazardous waste collection at the dump also, to get that out before them also?
Well, ultimately here, what I mean by enhanced is what we were talking about earlier. The system needs to be revamped, and there needs to be a place where it can go, I'd like to see on a daily basis.
Me too.
So I mean, this is a booming town. There's a lot going on here, and there's a lot of waste being created. So I think it's time we got a better handle on it, especially these types of wastes. Next item. At the meeting before ours last week with Sheila and Deputy Chief Gibson speaking about the town pier, he also mentioned some information about dredging, and it sounds like it's really just being pushed back. He did have a permit in place for Pulpus Harbor dredging, and now after the winter storms, he has a permit. Don't quote me on the numbers, but maybe 8 million cubic yards of sand he had a permit for, and now they feel like 100 million cubic yards of sand needs to be moved, so they have to completely re-permit. I know Peter was there. Ken, were you there also?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he mentioned that and this is pretty much how he put it, the authority that issues the permits for dredging does not like to issue dredging permits. So he says it's a very lengthy process, difficult to do, requires lots of studies. They were hoping to start a sand bank. They were hoping that some people nearby would be interested in the sand, but to end up with the spoils in front of your property or on your property, you have to be willing to attach to your deed an easement forever, allowing the public to use the beach in front of your property because you've taken sand from a dredging project. So I guess this has discouraged anybody in wanting any of the sand now in Pocomo and Pulpus areas or quays. So he's talking about how the sand would be barged to Steamboat Wharf, transferred from a barge onto trucks, and trucked to a storage site at the landfill. I thought we were in the new millennium and things worked easier, but they can hydraulically pump the sand up to 4,000 feet.
That's what they did when last time they dug the opening to the head of the harbor and took off that, what is it, Fifth Point, carved that off. They took the sand and they built up Pocomo Point. So when you go to the end of Pocomo Point Road and you park and you look out toward Cascada, they built it way up. You stand up a lot higher with all that sand. You rebuilt that. Whether that was the thing to do, probably it was easier just to pump it there than to have to go through with what you said.
Well, the other thing is they have to study where it will be deposited and make sure there's no like fiddler crabs that live there, and they won't be burying some wildlife that's of concern. So it's. I mean, they're also looking into simply offshore dumping, like they did when they did the channel through the jetties. That particular dredge that did that channel picks it up in its belly, takes it out, and they dumped it somewhere out in front of Dionis or the Cod of the Bay or something like that, which to me just doesn't seem to make sense. But it's an option that they use, and so it sounds like nothing's going to be moving forward too quickly with dredging, and I wish we had a staff member that we could instruct to look into this deeper. It sounds like Charlie has a lot going on, and this is more or less, and I'll quote him as saying, this responsibility just kind of landed on his desk now that Dave Franzuto is retired. It's on Charlie's desk, and so it adds to his already agenda that he already has. But
Andy?
Yes.
This applies to all the dredging they were talking about doing at the town docks and over by the steamship authority, and all the dredging projects that they had, or is it just the one out in Pulpus?
It has to do with, it starts with Pulpus, but then there's areas of maintenance dredging that Dave Franzuto is working on a plan to have I guess maintenance dredging is easier to permit for, and if you have areas of concern that you want to maintain through the years, he was working on a list of these priority areas that would ultimately be easier to permit once they're put on record, I guess. So as far as Steamboat goes, they probably don't require much for permitting at all. If they had a problem, they'd be able to dredge, just like the Coast Guard doesn't have to get a permit for any dredging. They can just do it. So, but I asked Charlie about the dredge that I saw in the paper on the vineyard that they've been using for 9 years, and he was questioning how they could possibly have a permit to be moving sand every day for the past 9 years. And so, this is the kind of information. I don't have all the information, not quite sure who to call, find out where to get that information, but I can't tell you how many times I've been over to Hyannis simply on the steamboat, and for the past 3 winters they've been dredging around the marina in Hyannis. It seems like a very kind of old-fashioned way of doing it, with an excavator on a barge, and he's got a containment box on board, and he paddles himself with the excavator bucket over to the dock and transfers the spoils into a concrete bermed box that they create in the parking lot, and then it gets moved someplace on land, and who's measuring it? How do you if the permit requires a measured amount of spoils to be recorded, I don't. It's been going on for at least 3 years in Hyannis. Right now, the barge is right at the Hyannis Marina. You can see it docked there for the summer. Probably going to go right back to work in the fall when the season's over. So it would be interesting to know. It's one of those things I'd, wish I had the time to just look up myself so I could have the answers.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Against a standing permit for a certain period of time, they went through all the permitting, they did all the work, and then probably got the permits to dredge when they could, which was off-season over a number of years to get it done. So that might be the situation on the vineyard as well, that they've got a standing permit to.
Well, maybe they've jumped through all the hoops, and they've got what hopefully Charlie's going to be able to work on. And from what I hear, Pulpus Harbor is very tricky to get in and out of if it's not high tide. So
it's really bad. And I walked the other side one time at low tide about a week ago, and you stand and you look up toward Quay's Point and over to Swain's Neck. The sand is it's amazing. It's just pushed way in toward from that western side. And it was low tide, and the 2 navigation buoys were beached. It's going to be if someone's blasting through there at low tide, they're going to get a surprise if they twitch the wheel just too much.
Well, I remember a couple of years ago, somebody was complaining about a big boulder that's in the channel somewhere there, and they were under the impression it was close enough to the beach where a machine could be driven down and actually pluck it out of there from dry land. But to get things like that done seems to, you have to be patient.
When was the last time? Excuse me. When was the last time they dredged the opening of Pulpus Harbor?
Maybe it was 20 years ago. Remember they built the 1983, I think, is when they rebuilt that bulkhead, what Dave calls a whaler in there, to keep the sand from coming in and blocking off the west side of Pulpus Harbor. And I think there was some dredging done as well. I think.
Because they used to, when I was a kid, they put the spoil on Quay's Point, and I don't know, that things were less
restricted.
Well, I don't know that they were that much less restricted, but that they didn't need to do as much, probably. And I know from the Conservation Commission that once you've gone through and gotten all the permits and the Army Corps of Engineers, then it just has your order of conditions gives you ongoing maintenance, whatever they deem as appropriate. So, but whatever that is probably long lapsed by now. So that does make it a little more difficult.
Any other thoughts, board members?
You know, you could, someone could call the Army Corps of Engineers and just ask what the process is, so we would know. Then you could find out what, why Barnstable County or Hyannis, why the vineyard get to just, go full bore all the time. There's got to be a solid reason. I mean, it's the federal government, it's the Army Corps of Engineers. If somebody is dredging anywhere in plain sight, I mean, they must have a permit. You might be able to find a way to pull that permit, somewhere. And isn't there a Ginger, doesn't DEP produce a publication that's online that you can look at that has all the projects that are going on? No?
Probably. I don't know. I'm not a
that-
very good computer wise.
I think that
That's a Jeff question.
I think that Army Corps produces some sort of online publication that shows all the projects that are ongoing, and you can go on and look. I remember as when I was writing for the paper, going online and looking at something like that.
Yeah, if you've got a file number, you should be able to get it. But this would be for some of the things that don't have file numbers yet. I mean, usually there's a DEP number associated with anything that requires that kind of.
I would think you'd be able to call up the DEP or the Army Corps of Engineers and Andy say that you're the chairman of our Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board. You're interested in finding out about dredging projects, and you need this information. I bet you would get somebody that would help you.
May I ask, what was the reasoning that when Dave came in, he said that we had permits to dredge whenever we wanted to for the distant future? Isn't that the way he presented it? And then how come all of a sudden it changed?
The projected amounts of sand to be moved now are much greater than what they were permitted for. So they don't want to proceed unless they're fully covered, because of course we have to hire a dredge to come over. So they want to be able to do everything they can while the dredge is here.
Gotcha.
Have all their permits in order. Excuse me, sorry about that. Any other comments, thoughts?
Not at the moment,
Dredging.
Mr. Chairman.
All good ideas, Peter. That's plenty of research to be done.
Well, also then you could, Dave Franzuta was on island frequently.
Right.
You could go over to the Goat Palace and knock on the door and say, hey, can you explain this to me? Because Dave's retired. Charlie Gibson has lots to do. He's a busy guy.
Yeah.
And he's very helpful, but this is one more thing he's got to do. And Dave did this for a living, so he could probably explain it to you, and he could probably give you the name of the guy to call at the Army Corps of Engineers to find out about it.
All right, moving forward, any more thoughts on goals and objectives? I know. We beat this up a little bit at the last meeting. Found that we've actually maybe exhausted some items, but I think we're still due for reviewing this and updating it.
I don't have mine with me. Fritz probably does.
I didn't bring it this
No.
time.
Maybe
Okay.
for the next meeting, we could have it that everyone brings in their suggestions so we can make up a new list. Just doesn't have to be a long process, just
Well, I mean, we've done this before. We had our, we all had our own ideas, and we combined them together, and it was a nice little list of interesting items. So I'd like to suggest that we all kind of, go back to the drawing board and pencil in your concerns, and we'll come together at the next meeting and try to move forward with having a list of things we intend to accomplish.
I think it's just the process of going through the list. I mean, the list is pretty complete. I mean, the first time we went through,
Well, and now we have more things in front of us.
Yes, no question about it, that dredging and everything else. But there are some things that we just sort of got stymied. I mean, I think the whole mooring thing, it just kind of ground to a halt. We did as much as we could, and then progress stopped. And I don't know what it takes to get the town to be more interested in it, or whether we tackle it from a different point of view, which is what I think you had mentioned, which is maybe try to get the mooring handlers together and say, we just want to do a limited thing here, and it shouldn't affect their livelihood. It's not a drastic change in what they have to do, and see whether they decide they want to push it again. I mean, it's basically selling more equipment, different kind of equipment. So instead of selling chain, you're selling, the expandable things for certain areas, not for all areas. But
well,
I don't know what it takes to get them together in a room to discuss that.
You got to go to them.
Yeah.
Find out where they hang out.
Yeah.
Say that let's meet at one person's spot, and we'll buy you lunch from Henry's or something, and then we'll post a meeting, and the board goes there, and you call the meeting to order, and then we talk to them for 30 minutes or whatever. I don't know.
Well, Fritz, I don't want you to be discouraged over this. Yes, it's stagnant, but it's not a dead issue. I think there's something we can move forward here with. So it's definitely not scratched off of our list. As we know, this isn't the time of year that Sheila wants to spend much time on this, and she already made that clear. But having spoken to one mooring handler who's very interested in moving forward with innovation, it's a matter of talking to others, and I have not, but I'm willing to if I run into them in the right time in the right place when they can take 10 minutes and talk about it. But
yeah, I mean, I think
at least to break the ice
at least
with
from
it.
what I understand from Lucy, I think when she's been here and we've talked to her, installing that system, which is using traditional ground weighting device, it's a mushroom or whatever, and if it's removed every year, what goes between, I don't think there's an issue with permits or anything else. I thought that she basically said that would be acceptable and they would approve them. So if that's the case, what prevents somebody who wants to do it, a mooring handler, from just saying, advertising that they've got them or talking to their clients and doing it? I mean,
That's when Sheila was saying that because of the storm and all the work that she had to do, that this thing wasn't going to happen this spring. She wasn't saying it was done. She was just saying it's going to happen next spring. So it's up to us to keep the issue alive and keep bugging her about it. So it's not dead.
Yeah.
It's just on hold.
Yeah.
So.
okay.
And we can certainly add it to the agenda anytime, and I'm more than willing to. But we'll get some more research in with mooring handlers and move in that direction.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, discussion on goals and objectives?
I would think that at the next meeting that we all bring our printouts, print it out, and bring with us our ideas that we want to add to it. And then maybe you, the chairman, could assign each of us something to follow up on so that we each make it an issue that we can come report back on. If there's any legwork that needs to be done outside of the meeting, that each of us could do that. So we're not just looking at the matrix every meeting going, well, we haven't done anything. Well, we can each be proactive on one of the issues. Call the necessary people, find out how far we can get it, and then maybe we reach a point where a recommendation to the board is needed, or we need to get Jeff or Sheila to do something, or, so that we are all working on it, I guess. But then reporting back to the board. That's my idea.
Good idea, Peter. So I've gotten big caps here. Make a list. All of you do the same, please. Okay. Moving on to new business. Response to the discussion at the June 5th meeting about Town Pier. I was just sad to hear a couple of comments that the pier was in substandard condition and not very welcoming, so to speak, and that there were other communities on the Cape that offered much better town piers than we do. And when it got to that point, I thought, I haven't been a whole lot of places on the Cape, but what I see right directly in Hyannis and Barnstable that's town-owned and operated is minimal at best. I think we've got it all over other towns, even though the town pier is certainly doesn't meet the highest standards, but it's a large facility with both standard finger pier docks and the floating dock system. It's certainly well utilized and in need of expansion with today's demands. It sounds like it has a shelf life, and a lot of the pilings actually, some have been replaced, more need to be replaced. It sounds like it's a constant thing, and there Charlie was mentioning a long-range outlook, having an engineer poke around at it again, and he was talking about how the bulkhead from the boat basin deflects northeast energy straight to the head of the town pier, and a lot of damage is caused in that manner, and they're talking about extending a bulkhead out to continue deflecting that energy. I would imagine then maybe Great Harbor Yacht Club would suffer more damage. I'm not sure, but I can remember when the town pier was just in the planning stages, and a lot of guys were hopeful that it was going to be a solid fill pier so that trucks could drive down and either supply or unload fishing boats, and at the same time you'd be out far enough to be able to have a ramp off the side and launch boats from, but that never happened. I mean, for it to be a perfect pier in my eye and a working pier, part of it being solid fill would make a huge difference, but of course you're talking a major capital expenditure there and permitting process and whatnot. But like I said earlier, I'd like everybody to just take a walk down there and see what you think for yourself. I'll be the first to admit I haven't walked down there since maybe March, and like I said, I think we should feel fortunate that it's there. We could have no town pier at all and only have the boat basin as an option, which means really no option. I think it prices most average people out of the market, but and if there's something that looks like it needs improvement, I'm sure Sheila's aware of it, but we could, she's going to be here to talk about it at the next meeting, I hope, and I mean, ultimately, I want to support Sheila because I know she's there, and I think she's on top of the damage that occurs during storms, and she got a marine company to come over very quickly in short notice to do some repairs this spring. They were here and gone very quickly, and they've done what needs to be done for now. So, at least in their eyes. So, you've got to remember it's an aging pier, and it's not exactly in the greatest location as far as there's a lot of shallow water there. It's a long pier.
I get the sense from that discussion that the town pier itself, the actual fixed pier, wasn't in too bad a shape. That planks get blown off now and again, and the end of the pier might need a little bit of work. But it was the floating docks that really was the pain in the ass, and that replacing that and getting the right thing in there, those concrete things, was the way to go. But I couldn't help thinking that why didn't they just extend the town pier, the fixed town pier, out like that and get rid of that altogether, and then you probably wouldn't have so much damage. But then, like you say, it's probably a big expenditure.
Yeah. Well, it seemed like the person who was complaining the most was interested in seeing the whole thing become a floating dock, and of course Charlie didn't sound like that was going to be an option any too soon, but it has its pros and cons. There's a lot of maintenance required with the floating dock. Has to come out every year. And
weren't they saying that the concrete pier concrete floating docks then have to be hauled across the sound and stored somewhere? Was that what they were saying? Or they have to put them somewhere?
Yeah.
And that getting the 40-foot lengths you don't want those because those are the ones that are bendy, and you want the shorter ones, is what I heard.
I missed some of that, I guess. But
and Petrol Landing, which is currently in litigation, the proposed work for Petrol Landing by the land bank, because there are people who are on Commercial Wharf that oppose it. I think part of the proposal was a place where boats could pull up to trucks, and that was a good spot for that. Anyway.
Well, I tell you, I would love to see a copy of that plan, even though I know that is held up, as you say, in litigation. But
you could get it from Natural Resources.
Yeah,
you could get that from the Conservation Commission.
And maybe that's something we all ought to look at also, because I've got a feeling, the green space and the park benches are, to me, is not as useful as full access for vehicles, a pickup truck to be able to pull up and push a dinghy out of the back, seeing as they're proposing a dinghy dock, but they're also proposing pathways and green space and benches and
but there were picnic tables there before. The reason it's being appealed is because of the commercial nature of all the water. That's why I guess the people are upset. So,
well,
yeah,
it is Commercial Wharf.
Yeah.
I love the old pictures from there. Might be some here on the wall, but all right. Any other comments? Town pier. Public, please. We encourage your wisdom.
Catering is a very stressful job.
Not tonight.
Relief means coming to show meetings.
Items for our next meeting? Any thoughts? Something new?
Well, I was going to give you an update on the green crabs. We talked about it last meeting that I was going to give a report on that and the skimmers in the harbor. Last year, the town and the land council started doing research, and it's actually just a land council being done by Emily Malden, who seems to be a knowledgeable and dedicated scientist, by the way. She said that they went out to Hussey Shoal and began to mark crabs with the intention of going around this year around the harbor and seeing if they're migrating at all. But that's all that's being done right now. She did come out with comments, as we have brought up here in meetings throughout the last year, that the only real plan that you can have with the green crab is to not to eradicate them, but to try to keep their numbers down by trapping them and bringing them to land for their last trip. But they are doing work on that, so that's nice to know at least that something's being done. Apparently, most of the damage is done because they rummaged through the eelgrass and disturb the roots and kill the eelgrass. So that's one well-known reason that they're not good for the harbor. For the skimmers in the boat basin, at one point the town put down some oil absorbers by the drains that come from the Stop and Shop parking lot area. They're storm drains that come into the boat basin, and they cover the exhaust of those vents. And when you go down there and look, you can see on the Stop and Shop side that the side that's letting water come in from the storm drains is nice and clear, and on the other side of the absorbers is where the oil is. So you can tell it's not coming from the town sewer system, it's coming from the harbor itself. And they seem to be having an effect doing that. But in the past I talked about trying to have some kind of a skimmer in there to not only take care of the oil but the other debris. And that sea bin that I was telling you about, the Australian guys, they haven't quite gotten it to market yet. But today I found another place that it was called Trash Skimmer, marinatrashskimmer.com out of Washington. And I looked into it more. They have these units in Newport Harbor now and Gloucester. Newport looks like they're getting more. Both of those towns said that they'd have someone that's working on the project give me a call back so I could sort of assess of how efficient these units are. They cost about $10,000, I found out. But they're the size of a dumpster, and they circulate the water to take in, it's over 1 million pounds of trash, they said in one of their brochures. So
trash being like solid debris, or
floating
also
trash.
What about liquids that are floating?
Oil, yep. Yeah, they have absorbers in them. You can get them with absorbers in them to take the oil out also. But I just wanted to report on it because I know I've been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah.
And just to let you keep up with things. It's hard to find something that would be appropriate for our marina. Down in Baltimore, they have this huge, it's like a Ferris wheel type thing that they put it on a boat, and it's like a paddle wheel from the days of the Mississippi River, and they pull up tons of trash with that. But then again, that's Baltimore Harbor, which I guess is a little bit dirtier than ours.
Nothing like being proactive, though. I mean, but really you're being reactive to what you already see. So, I mean, you're seeing something there in the water that's compelling you to look into skimmers. And, I mean, I mentioned it before we started the meeting, that corner where the launch is always has just looks like a coffee frap floating in that corner. And among other things that are floating in with the coffee frap, and it only seems logical that we do something about it. So,
as I stated before, the boat basin is a natural trap for everything.
Yeah.
Why not get it before it gets out into the harbor?
There's poor circulation in there, and it's still, ever since it was installed, it's leaching creosote off itself. So, which can't be good. I wonder if we're paying the price today for what's been slowly seeping since the 1960s. It's hard to measure.
Well, there was lots of other stuff down there, under that whole end of town. The gazebo and all that wasn't it was left open for a reason, and you still get that coal gas smell sometimes on a rainy day.
You go on the Pacific Club and use that ATM, you can smell
That's it.
Yeah. No, I put a big heavy-duty fence in years ago, late 90s, behind the Thomas Macy warehouse. And at 6 to 8 inches, you're hitting oil. You literally, it's like you're drilling for oil. And I was digging holes for 6x6 posts, 3 to 3.5 feet deep. And it wasn't pretty. It didn't smell good. But it's amazing how the trees and the flowers out in the parking lot survive just fine. So it's
well,
there's big trees.
They're sitting on top, probably.
Yeah.
You take a look at some of the trees in the A&P parking lot, and their root system has to be down in that oil.
I was around when someone did some soil testing on North Wharf. They pound a spoon down, and there was a gas station at the end of North Wharf in our childhood, and it smelled like gasoline with some of the soaked wood from the old barges where they sunk the cobbles. Didn't smell so good to me either. So sometimes disturbing those things makes them worse because you're releasing them. And, the whole electric company site is something that, I think going a couple years down the road, if there are, big plans for using that site for other things, that, there's transformer oil and all those other things that have, been there from long ago that will need to be thought about.
Boy, I was under the impression the last discussion I heard about the Wilk Square development was the cleanup at the electric company site was complete or nearing completion, and I never see any activity there. So
I would be interested to know.
What is the cleanup that's taking place?
I was on the Conservation Commission when we did permit them to put a fabric down and soil on top. And, that's not a cleanup.
Right, it's an encapsulation of sorts.
Of sorts.
Because we're not getting under it, just over it. So,
but if they're planning on putting buildings in there,
there'll be some disturbance then, won't there? And as we can see out at the landfill, it seems like
the parking garage. There's going to be some.
Yeah.
I haven't been a part of that study group, so I don't know whether that's been part of their consideration. Or
sounds interesting. Dave Fredericks is kind of the spokesperson for that, and when I saw the first proposal for it, the plan is for the grocery store to be moved to the corner of the parking lot across from what used to be the 5 and 10, and then everything else changes from there. Of course, it'd be great to see the tank farm finally gone, but
that's in the works.
Yeah. Well, we're using so much less oil. So many people have turned to propane. So it's really amazing how fewer people are using oil to heat their homes today. So, items for our next meeting. I think we'll continue probably most of what we were talking about tonight, and I'm sure more will come up.
So the next meeting, instead of July 3, you said is July...
Well, I'm thinking July 18th.
July 18th, okay.
Because really the Tuesday would be July 4th.
I'll call Maria Davis, try and remember to call her tomorrow, and see what I can find out about this room being available.
Okay.
If not, if we need to meet, try and get the conference room over in the Plus building.
Mm-hmm. You familiar with that one, Ginger? Okay.
Small, but it does it.
And
will you let us know definitely.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
When
Thanks.
When I know that we can do it, I'll tell Andy, and then I'll send everyone an email.
Okay, great.
Right, and I'll shoot out text. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Kona.
Yeah, thank you.
Bring us some information, some fodder. We're actually supposed to see Dan Pronk tonight.
I do. Reading.
Dan Pronk
Reading.
wanted to come in and talk
Yeah.
about opening conch season every year in the harbor.
For a while, I've got some astigmatism. For a while, I went through a period of
Is that a Bronco
not
you were
being able to
driving
see
the other day?
road signs at night.
Blazer,
So I went
70
actually,
Blazer.
and my eyes did.
My
Really?
childhood
I
dream.
couldn't read it. I'd be going
Got it,
down,
huh?
coming down 95 south when I lived in
now.
Providence. I'm driving back from Boston.
But my dad used to take me out for rides when I was,
I found
there were two guys who had them, and they were always parked in front of the drugstore. And I used to
I was
say,
almost